Canada is really a beacon of progress. Well, according to how you see progress. If you're thinking of progress in that kind of humanist, globalist, the human will and the human intellect has the power to find just about any solution. If that's the way you view things, well, Canada might really be the home of progress at the forefront there in this society. And a recent law that they have allowed to be passed in Canada that really and truly, when you look at it, provides a perfect example of that. MAID, medical assistance in dying. And if it sounds kind of like, wait, are they saying that you'll get medical assistance in ending your own life? Well, yes, it sounds like what it is. It is what it seems like. And recently there was a commercial for this. That's really what drew my attention back again to it. I heard about it before, and then I watched this commercial, and it had a dark futuristic feel to it, where the commercial was for a clothing company that was advertising their brand based on, as it were, the coolness of ending your own life.
Last breaths are sacred. When I imagine my final days, I see bubbles.
And I could understand how some people could see beauty in that. It's according to how you see life. What is your view of the value of life? Is human life just like any other life on the planet? Is it no more different than the life of a rabbit, than the life of anything else? We're all just part of this cycle, and the only reason that one person is of more value to the other is due to their emotional attachment. So if you're emotionally attached to someone, well, then you have that value in it. But there's no intrinsic value to the human life. That's a kind of humanist view where you aren't seeing anything further than the natural plane, nothing into that God or esoteric realm. There's no extra value to human life beside the physical here. And then there's the other side where each human life has intrinsic value, and many people who speak about that talk about us being valued in terms of being created by God, and each individual soul has equal amount of value because we were created in the image and likeness of God, and He breathed His breath into us, etc., etc. And if you have that view of life, you would have a much more sacred view of this whole living business. Now, those different views could be seen even in things as simple as pro-life and pro-choice, as it's called, in the arguments for and against abortion. If you don't see human life as being intrinsically valuable, then abortion is but a convenience issue. Which is it most convenient to do? While if you do see human life as being intrinsically valuable, then you very likely may be seeing some problems in this whole thing. And to me, I think there exists a problem where many times we look at things with that kind of esoteric, very difficult to explain value that we have for a long time, and we interfere with them in modern times. And I think sometimes we may not even understand the actual real world ramifications of it, what might come out of changing these things. And that's what we're going to look into here with that Canadian policy, see a little bit if we could understand what they're talking about and what some of the arguments for and against it might be. If you are interested in this kind of stuff, be sure to hit that like button. Make sure you are subscribed if you are not yet subscribed, and tell me what you think about this topic. A very interesting topic indeed. Should everyone have the right to end it whenever they see fit? And how broad would that everyone having the right be? Because that's part of the question. All right. From the AP News, disturbing, experts troubled by Canada's euthanasia laws. Alan Nichols had a history of depression and other medical issues, but none were life-threatening. When the 61-year-old Canadian was hospitalized in June 2019 over fears he might be suicidal, he asked his brother to bust him out as soon as possible. Within a month, Nichols submitted a request to be euthanized, and he was killed. Despite concerns raised by his family and a nurse practitioner, his application for euthanasia listed only one health condition as the reason for his request to die: hearing loss. So the man was admitted to the hospital because he was suffering with suicidal ideation. Now, thoughts of suicide typically in our general history of medicine have been viewed as a medical problem that we're trying to solve. This is a medical issue that we're trying to solve here. In this case, they're saying, well, maybe it's not a medical issue. It might be the solution to some medical issue you might have. And in this case, the medical issue the man had was hearing loss. He could not hear that well, and that was reason enough to help him be killed. Nichols' family reported the case to police and health authorities, arguing that he lacked the capacity to understand the process and was not suffering unbearably among the requirements for euthanasia. They say he was not taking needed medication, wasn't using the cochlear implant that helped him hear, and that hospital staffers improperly helped him request euthanasia. Alan was basically put to death, his brother Gary Nichols said. Disability experts say the story is not unique in Canada, which arguably has the world's most permissive euthanasia laws, allowing people with serious disabilities to choose to be killed in the absence of any other medical issue. So that's the general idea of the law right there. If you have any kind of disability, serious disability, but as you see, hearing loss is one of them, so serious there may be a bit subjective. You have a disability and you can get the permission to request that the medical staff help you to end your life. Is this something that we want permissible in our societies? Apparently Canada does. Do you think that if someone is in some amount of suffering, that a good recommendation for them is that maybe you should end it all? You know, I heard a comedy piece on this one. Someone did a comedy piece on this all, and they were talking about the way ending it all really is a really tempting offer if you start to entertain it. Like, you know, you're in a line and the line gets too long and you're saying, oh gosh, this is going to take 45 minutes of my time. You know what gets really tempting there? You know what? Let's just end this all. Or you have a grade below A. It's a B plus grade, as the Commissioner of Police in Trinidad gave himself, although we are on record murder rates, just by the way. But if you get a B plus grade and your parents insist on an A, and you have to go home and tell them that, you know what, well, that's a pretty difficult situation to have to face. You know what could be more tempting? Well, just end it all. If the options are end it all in the face of difficulty, where do we curtail that? Because the human existence on this reality plane is fraught with difficulty. That's one of the most common things about human existence, difficulty. Here's another article, an opinion piece here by a doctor in Psychiatric Times. Oh, Canada, your new law will provide, not prevent, suicide for some psychiatric patients. You see, the point that he was making in this is that recently there was a development in that law where it wasn't just if you had a physical disability. Initially, that was the first thing. If you had a serious physical disability, something life-threatening, well, then you can go and get that done. But now it has developed. You see, in countries like Canada, where discrimination is a big thing, you want to make sure that no one is being discriminated against. So anytime you open up any law for anyone, very likely soon enough you're going to find out that many people are going to sue on the basis of discrimination. So if your disability is physical and you are allowed to end your life, if my disability is mental, why shouldn't I be allowed to end my life? And I could sue on the basis of that. You are discriminating, and this MAID, this medical assistance in dying, this is being seen as a medical decision. So you are discriminating medically against me. You're seeing the direction this thing is headed in. Developments in Canada. Canada is the latest nation to legalize voluntary death for psychiatric conditions. In 2016, Canada passed Bill C-14, a law permitting medical euthanasia and physician-assisted suicide, together known as medical aid in dying, MAID, M-A-I-D. By November 2020, more than 19,000 individuals nearing the end of life had been voluntarily euthanized. A key eligibility criterion of this law was that a patient's natural death is predicted to be reasonably foreseeable, a unique Canadian terminology that was not statutorily defined. So, in the first place, the initial form of this law is that first, your death had to be reasonably foreseeable. So, you were going to die soon. You were going to die just now. That's the initial part of this law. If you're going to die soon, then it pops up. But that's a difficult thing to define, because as people like me, I enjoy speaking technically occasionally when somebody asks you something about time and you talk about time being a construct. What is a reasonably foreseeable time into the future? If you're born at the age of 0, you are going to die in a reasonably foreseeable point of time in the future, according to who it's being reasonable to. If you're at 20 and you get diabetes, it might decrease your average life expectancy, not by a great amount if you live healthily and take medication, but it may decrease it some. And you could say, well, your life expectancy, your death now is at some point reasonably foreseeable in the future. And if you're thinking, no way, no one is going to make this argument, well, yes, that's exactly the argument that people are making. Because death from mental disorders was not seen as strongly predictable, mental illnesses were not considered eligible conditions. This feature of the law was a check on the kind of psychiatric euthanasia practiced in some of those European countries. In 2019, however, that started to change. A new federal bill was introduced to extend euthanasia eligibility without limiting it to the end of life. This new initiative removed the prior exclusion of those who have non-terminal chronic illnesses and permitted euthanasia for those whose psychological or physical suffering is deemed intolerable and untreatable. So, they changed the law. It's not just if you are going to die just now, which was already something iffy. Now, it's people with chronic illness, with chronic mental illness. Not necessarily life-threatening, but just chronic. It doesn't go away. It's intolerable, or it's untreatable. And intolerable is, again, a subjective word, because let's look at an example of that in terms of social changes. Divorce. Divorce was a rare thing at one point in time, at least in the Western world. When divorce became much more permissible through that little avenue of irreconcilable differences. And that's the reason that the vast majority of people divorcing now take irreconcilable differences. Are those differences really irreconcilable? Well, if that avenue wasn't open, I am pretty sure a lot of those differences would have been reconciled. So if you did not have the ability to end it all, I am pretty sure that a lot of the intolerable diseases that many people may face may have actually been tolerable. If you have an option to end it all, very light things could become very intolerable. Like many of us in the modern time, we talk about the first world problems. It was a meme, it is still a meme. First world problems when the toaster burnt, or when the toaster didn't burn your bread just good enough and you're like really stressed about this. And to someone who is living in a pampered world, some really soft things could be intolerable. Like the anti-bullying campaigns that have gone on for the last couple decades in the West. When you see sometimes what some people consider intolerable levels of bullying, you're like, maybe we should toughen up some. And if you're thinking maybe we should toughen up some, but then you're offering people a get out of it, well, not free, but a get out of it instantly card. then what do you expect people to choose? And one of the things that gets even scarier in this is, okay, an adult, you might argue, they may have the option if they want to end it all. Well, that's really their choice. Really and truly, it's an adult's choice. It has always been. If you wanted to end your own existence, it kind of has always been your choice. Now, something could be said about making it easier. If you make something like this easier to happen, medical assistance, someone could go into a hospital and request to die. There are some arguments there that very likely you're going to increase the occurrence of that reality. But that's big people. You could say, okay, big people, they're being led down the wrong path, but okay, fine, they're big people. What about underage people, though? What about children? Puberty could be a very difficult time. There are some young people, there are some adolescent people who do end their own lives during puberty. It's a confusing, difficult time. Even though a lot of the difficulty and confusion could be internal, mental in nature, it is. So, would it be allowable for them? And then what about young children? There have already been arguments made for abortion because of Down syndrome or severe disability. If you see it before birth, well, then you can abort the child. So what about if the child is born and you see a severe deformity, an abnormality, something that you don't favor in your child? Well, could you get some medical assistance in the child dying too? Perspective. Inside the world of Canada's assisted suicide for mature minors. Canada's already controversial euthanasia laws could expand to include children who qualify. Abel Pelletier was only 4 years old when his mother, Carrie-Lynn Pelletier, began petitioning the Canadian Parliament to allow a physician to take his life in a medically assisted death. Abel was severely disabled because of a rare condition called Mednick syndrome. The disease is incurable, although medications can manage certain aspects of the condition. Still, this case isn't what most people think of when they think of euthanasia or assisted suicide. They think of elderly people with a terminal illness, not 4-year-olds. But this is where Canada's notoriously broad laws permitting medically assisted suicide have wound up. So, they have in their law where they're attempting to expand it to what they consider mature minors. Now, I dislike that idea in the first place. The reason a minor is considered a minor is because they are not yet mature. Those two, I don't like them going together because the connotation of mature minor has further connotations beside just them ending their own lives. I mean, if you're saying a minor has the capability to make a decision to end their own life, is there any decision in living that you could restrict from that minor? That does not make sense. That's on the mature minor side. And even on the side of this 4-year-old, how much of that would there be popping up where parents determine that this child's life isn't going to be ideal? So let's end it right now before it gets too far on along. And okay, it might be the Mednick syndrome there, but who is to say which syndrome it's going to be left at? If this child is born and has Down syndrome, yes, they may live, but if I think their life quality will not be ideal, should the parent be able to end it? And I think, to me, logically, this is just the logical progression of abortion. As many of the pro-life people have been saying for a very long time, why end at birth? There's no logical reason to end at birth. If you're saying convenience or healthcare reasons is a determining factor for ending your own child's life at some point before birth, I don't see a logical reason why it would stop after birth. And many people are like, nah, that will never happen because we live in a society where it's not the norm. But if you look at the logical progression of things, I don't see a logical reason why that would be stopped there. And this, to me, seems like the easy way step to eugenics. There have been eugenicists out there for a very long time now. And the general idea of that the eugenicists have is that human population should be controlled, like you would control the breeding stock in cows or dogs. You want the preferable breeding stock to make children, and the unwanted undesirables, you want them to not make children or to die out eventually. And that hasn't been a new thing. That's been an old thing. Nearly every time it has been tainted and sprinkled with racism, but it has been a common thing. To me, this law seems like a voluntary way to get eugenics going. So we get the poor people, life is too difficult in poverty, let's help you end it all here. Or we get the disabled people, that disability, you can't function like that, you should end it all here. And you could get down even to the children level. And the thing with that disability, a country like Canada, where their health system, similar to Trinidad and Tobago, is public in nature, the public pays for it. And because the public pays for it, the recommendations about what you do with your health condition comes from the doctors. So what do you do if you go to a doctor, ask them for treatment for something, and their recommendation is, how about you die? And that's not unheard of. Canadian Paralympian veteran offered suicide by Trudeau government after asking for in-home chairlift. Madam, if you are really so desperate, we can give you medical assistance in dying now. Paralympian Christine Gauthier reportedly was told by a Veterans Affairs Canada case worker. A disabled and retired Canadian Army corporal and former Paralympian Christian Gaultier testified on Thursday before Parliament that a caseworker from Veterans Affairs Canada suggested she consider medically assisted suicide, otherwise known as death, instead of waiting for a wheelchair lift to be installed in her home. Gauthier said she could not believe the VAC would give me an injection to help me die, but you will not give me the tools I need to help me live. And imagine that, for us, if you're looking at this as a Trinidadian, my country of birth, where we know our public health care leaves a lot to be desired still. Many people know you go request some kind of surgery, some kind of treatment in the public healthcare system, and they may tell you, well, that's a 7-year wait. And if they tell you it's a 7-year wait, would they recommend in the meantime that you end it, if that was the law here? If you want a surgery in the public healthcare system, and the most soon time they have available is the next 5 years, and it's a pretty intolerable, as we heard before, something you don't want to live with. In the 5 years, in you pressing to get your surgery done, might they recommend, well, you know what, we could end it all right now? Is that really the direction we want to be headed in? I do understand why many people who lean towards the progressive side, who lean towards the idea that we as humans could create and craft all the reality around us. We are a blank slate, we can create or destroy as we see fit. I understand why to that view it could seem very beautiful. But I think that isn't looking far enough down the road. What happens when we treat human life with this kind of disregard, where you could end it on a whim? You could end it if you feel like it. Yes, you could end your own, but then how many steps away are we from the medical authority or whatever the authorities be determining when a life could be ended? Because if the view of life as sacred is being degraded, is it possible that it won't just be the person deciding on their own, but maybe more so throughout the society we see some darker, creepier, more morbid kind of ideas popping up? That's all I have for now. Tell me what you think. Do you think that the medical assistance in dying is a good idea? That we should be doing this? And if you think we should be doing this, do you think that it should stop only at one level? You know, we should only allow old people who are terminally ill to do it. And then how do you think you are actually going to get it to only stay at that level without it being considered discriminatory? Or do you think that this MAID should be expanded to every single human? Every human that is alive has the right to die on their own whenever they see fit, even if they are underage, and even if it's their parent seeing fit on their behalf. Drop a comment, tell me what you think. That's all I have for now. I will see you in the next video. Later.